This Humanitarian Conversations podcast was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, also known as Melbourne, Australia. We pay our respects to elders past and present. We acknowledge and seek to champion the continued connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to land, waterways and skies, and we pay our respects to all First Nations people whose communities we work in across the world. Hello and welcome to Humanitarian Conversations, a RedR Australia podcast which explores what it means to be a humanitarian in today's world. I'm Sally Cunningham. In this episode of Humanitarian Conversations, I have the pleasure of chatting with Tai-Ring Teh, an incredibly experienced humanitarian engineer, RedR Australia roster member, and associate trainer. Tai-Ring grew up in Malaysia, where from an early age, he took a deep interest in how engineering can transform people's lives for the better. When the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami hit, it gave him the opportunity to apply his civil engineering skills to make a significant difference for communities in Aceh, Indonesia. Since that life-altering experience, Tai-Ring has devoted his career to supporting people affected by crisis, from the Solomon Islands to Rwanda, from Nepal to South Sudan and beyond. Tai-Ring has used his engineering skills to help communities gain or regain access to safe water and improve sanitation, and has worked for organisations such as Red Cross, UNICEF, UNHCR and the World Health Organization. With his depth of experience, Tai-Ring also mentors up-and-coming humanitarian engineers, and as a long-standing RedR Australia associate trainer, he loves to share his wealth of knowledge on our courses and train professionals to be ready for the field. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tai-Ring. Now, your career has taken you around the world to some interesting and complex places, but it all started for you in Malaysia. Can you give us some insight into what it was like growing up in Malaysia and what the community taught you about disaster preparedness and response?
I'm really happy that you mentioned this one. Malaysia is a very fortunate country where there is hardly any major natural disaster apart from seasonal flooding during monsoon. So there isn't much of the disaster preparedness or experience that I grew up with. And also, I did join the Malaysian Red Crescent as an ordinary member of my high school. We just learning on the basic first aid. So that was the basic emergency preparedness I have ever had in Malaysia until the Indian Ocean tsunami happened in the Boxing Day 2004. That was totally unexpected, and it was the biggest natural disaster, even for Malaysia, in history. So for humanitarian work in Malaysia, we see humanitarian work as a volunteer work and also for charities. So a lot of my friends wouldn't even understanding what kind of work I'm working in. We just don't have the opportunity to actually do anything.
Look, I can relate to that. A lot of people don't, unless they work in the sector directly, they don't have a comprehensive idea of what humanitarian work might be and how it is very much a dedicated career. Now, I know you started your career as a civil engineer, but you're known for your expertise as a humanitarian and WASH engineer. What drew you to engineering initially, and what was your first job?
You know, it's very interesting that you're mentioning it. It actually give me some soul searching on what exactly started me on engineering and what actually put me on this particular path. It was not my actual very first job, but it's my high school time summer job that I actually went over to my father's construction work site, which is in a remote jungle in Malaysia, building hydropower dam, a mini hydropower dam, not a big one, to provide electricity to the nomadic people in the jungle. When we're talking about the jungle, I mean, literally, I remember I had to go in for about 2 or 3 hours of dirt road inside the jungle and then walk about half an hour just to
Wow.
reach the work site. That particular work was sponsored by the World Bank for Malaysia Rural Development, bringing the electricity into what we call the indigenous community in Malaysia Peninsula.
Mm.
And that was the time that I actually decided to go into civil engineering because I love it. And that related to what I'm doing as a full-time humanitarian. That
Mm.
very beginning, that spark what I love.
Yeah, there's definitely a connection there working in those rural communities and using your expertise to help build that access. That's a very good foundation, I think.
Yeah, thank you. When the tsunami hit and on the reconstruction effort on the Aceh, where I actually decided to continue and down its path is because I found what I was initially like to do as an engineer.
Mm.
That really put me into walking further and further into the humanitarian work.
So it is hard to believe that the Indian Ocean tsunami was over 21 years ago, and it's still such a significant event in the region's disaster memory, and with so many lessons learned that have informed work from that time. So this event was a big turning point for your career too. So can you share with us what that was like and how you were called to support?
I was a volunteer for Malaysian Red Crescent Society. So when the Boxing Day tsunami happened, I was actually post-party mode at that time. I didn't even turn on the TV. The friends that I was with couldn't reach me in any way. Now, they thought that I had disappeared in the tsunami, which I have absolutely didn't know anything about it. And after they found out that I was okay, what they did was that they raised a fund and put me onto the street to raise the funding for Malaysian Red Crescent, which I did. A group of us put it over to Malaysian Red Crescent Society with the condition that a couple of us will have a chance to go to help the people who were caught in the disaster. So I myself was deployed to Aceh. I ended up that I was the only engineer. The rest of it is all medical staff. And when I was on the ground, I was very fast picked up by the federal IFRC, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, to help out in terms of water distribution and also treatment and the sanitation side. Very fast, and then working together with Australian Defence Force, which is also stationed over there. That was the first time I also knowing what is RedR Australia, because still a very good friend, Tanley, was deployed over there on behalf of IFRC
Mm-hmm.
and RedR Australia, together with Australian Aid. So that was the time where I just realized my skill that I learned and I've been practiced in the private sector in Malaysia as a construction industry and also as a water treatment industry was really, really needed in this particular humanitarian sector. There were virtually no one there. And combined with my first experience, I say, wow, this is something that I really like to do and I can contribute a lot. That started up my nearly 20 years of career in humanitarian.
That's a wonderful story. You don't know when you're needed, but the fact that you're ready and you've got great skills to contribute, that's what is needed. And as that was your step deeper into the humanitarian sector, where did that take you next?
So the years of all the preparedness that I learned from the Malaysian Red Crescent Society combined with on-the-site experience, I was leading the UNICEF disaster response in various parts of Indonesia. For example, the Yogyakarta earthquake, the Padang and Mentawai earthquake, and also the Semarang flooding. Indonesia at that time was full of a natural disaster, one after the other. At the same time, I was contacted by RedR Australia to see whether there is a possibility I can provide some training in Australia for water sanitation. That's when I started drafting the water and sanitation course. It was back in 2006, 7, and I actually started the training in 2008. Still until today, still running from time to time.
Now, it seems like you have deep experience that has stemmed from that time in Aceh, but also across Indonesia, as you've just mentioned. But you've also spent quite a bit of time in African countries as well as other parts of Asia. So can you tell us a little bit about a deployment or humanitarian role you've been a part of where you were able to see the positive impact you and your team made for the families and the communities that you were living in at the time?
There are many, many, many examples. Almost every deployment, it touches the community. One of the things that I do know as compared to the traditional engineering is the traditional engineering doesn't looking at the beneficiary that much. But humanitarian engineering, it's really putting the human factor above the technical know-how. That means that you have to putting into your beneficiary more as to what are the things that you do, it will benefit the community. I just want to bring it back to the very first humanitarian work, which is actually back in Aceh. There is one particular area where northeast of Aceh that was completely wiped out by tsunami. And for us to have the villagers come back, rebuild their own village, very first thing is to get the water running. I started to go into the island. It would take about 6 hours of boat just to reach the island. I still draw back my memory when I was 14, 15 years old in Malaysia, the memory where I worked in the rural mini hydro project and using that particular knowledge to work with the tsunami survival of that island to draw out how to catch the water catchment in their jungle to pipe the water back into the rebuilt village. I draw out a very simple dam and hire the villagers and saying, okay, I'll give you the money for your labor to build it. Now, they know that this is for their own good, for their own water supply. They overdone my expectation. Instead of making a simple water supply system, they make it into something very grand, very big, very permanent, that even to me was a surprise that they not only take the project as their own, they expand it and insisted that this is much better. And I was very touched by that. I went back to Aceh in 2023. And one of the person that I met at the airport remember me, one of the residents on the island. He still remember me. And he told me the water supply that I built, that I designed, still running, and everybody love it.
Amazing.
And that was a very good indicator of people really appreciate the work that we done.
That's a really touching story. I can hear it in your voice as well. We look at how we review projects and impact, and all you need is to run into someone years later and understand the sustainability of your efforts.
But I also want to give you another one. Just remember that this is something totally unexpected. Now, in Myanmar, where I was deployed after Indonesia, was Cyclone Nagis. So Cyclone Nagis is the most devastated natural disaster for Myanmar or Burma. Over 150,000 people died
Yeah, that's shocking.
on there.
Yeah.
So I was deployed as a UNICEF war specialist over there. And I went over the disaster zone, taking water samples and checking the water, whether it's suitable. Now, unknowingly, I mean, everywhere I go, there are children that follow me, wondering what we're doing.
Yeah.
Now, back in 2023, that is nearly 13 years after that particular work. I was giving a presentation of humanitarian engineering in University of Sydney. And in one of the course, the lecturer invited me to give a talk for the class. Now, during the class, there's one student that stand up and put it up and saying that the reason he is in engineering is because he saw someone in the UN went to his village and taking water sample out of the pond that he was using, his village was using, and make some tests. Now, he saw that person and saying that I want to be that person when I grow up. And then since then, he studied really hard from the rural village into the National University in Yangon in Myanmar, and then get a scholarship for the master degree in University of Sydney and study engineering that he's intended to bring back to Myanmar to assist the building of the country.
Amazing.
And I asked him, where is Myanmar that he saw this person? And he mentioning one particular area that he was there. And I know that he saw me.
Amazing.
I was the only one that is doing the water testing at that time in that location.
Wow.
And I told him, I said, look, I was the person. And he was...
that would have been...
He you know, the shock of him, and he was so appreciated that he finally met me.
How inspiring. Wow.
Yeah. So that was something I wasn't planned to, I wasn't even thinking of. Yeah, that's how we touch people.
Yeah.
Okay, at the least expected time.
That is a reward you would never anticipate when you're testing water in a place recovering from a devastating event. And then down the track to meet them in a whole other country in a very different context and to have that relayed back to you. That's pretty amazing stuff right there. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased you got to connect with that young person as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was really touched by that, and I hope that there will be more of that. That I can that I be able to inspire for the next generation engineers.
Yeah, and show them that what is possible, that it's what can happen beyond that study, and who knows where it will take them. So you've worked in some very challenging places, as we've mentioned, and I wanted to ask you, when you put yourself out there and you see the devastation and the depth of the recovery that's ahead, how do you take care of yourself as well to keep going back again and again? How do you build your personal resilience? What advice can you share?
A lot of self-disciplines and also understanding what you're there for. I mean, that is really a passion. I also have to be honest to you, I didn't come up unsketched.
Yeah.
I mean, I have burnout moments as well. One of it is really in Somaliland, which is part of Somalia.
Yeah.
That I encounter really challenging people that I have to work with. That I had a burnout, and I actually stopped being a humanitarian worker for about nearly a year and a half to 2, and back to being engineers, back to the old job. But then the draw of going back to humanitarian is still there because this is what I like to do. It's a lot of breaks, always looking at positive sides. What I did was that I stopped being a full-time employee and I become a RedR deployee. That means a RedR roster member, where it's on the short to longer term basis. If I like the job over there, I'll stay longer.
Yeah.
If I can't work well with the people or that is a very toxic environment, basically just say, yep, I have this contract. You know, the end of contract, I get out, I'll look for somewhere else. I mean, there is a lot of challenges, especially personal challenges that anyone will face.
Yeah. You're moving to different countries where there's different cultural practice, different processes. And when you're working in surge, like humanitarian context with RedR Australia, you're expected to just jump in straight away. There's not a 6-month warm-up period. You can balance it knowing that, okay, it's going to be difficult for 3 months and then we break. There's that kind of flexibility.
Yeah.
Now, We've already talked about how inspiring a mentor and trainer you have been able to be across your career as well. So we can see you're a strong mentor, which is so important in humanitarian and development work, particularly when it comes to sustainability of programs. So can you tell us a little bit about the need to mentor and train when you are in country?
I believe it's really important for any new professional to be able to find to one particular mentor that they can following or work with. I was very lucky that I was selected in 2016 under the Global Mentor Initiative by the Global WASH Cluster and RedR UK working together on there. I was selected as a global mentor. I have worked with about 5 young WASH professionals, with 2 of them until today still in very close contact. In a sense, I'm looking back into my very beginning of my humanitarian work, and I understanding a lot of people, especially young professionals who are joining in and starting to exploring their way in the sector, that they're not quite sure whether they are doing the work correctly. Of course, the sector has improved a lot with the sphere standards. WASH is there.
Yeah.
The mentorship is extremely important for new young professional because it is not how smart you are. It's more how you being able to take the advice or the guidance of the people who has more experience in the sector to guide you through all the maze or a light to guide you in the dark and saying that way, that's the way you want to go and follow me.
I think that's a really nice way to put it, because this is a collaborative sector and there's never a first disaster. It's a continuation of events. And the more that we can learn from our experiences, the better the outcomes are. So it's nice to hear that the value is there on both sides as well. And it does make us all stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on that spot.
So what advice would you give to someone listening who might be interested in pursuing this kind of work?
I think I'll give you 3 advice. I say, number 1, what you're doing, for the humanitarian work, it really open up your mind to see more color in your life. Different culture, different people, different places where you can visit. If you wanted to see the world, this is how you should do it. The second advice is that to be mindful that you need to be aware of your own safety and with the good discipline and always looking at positively the challenges that may overwhelm you, but you have to be getting really good self-discipline and awareness. The last advice I was saying that seek out a good mentor, a really good one that can help you through all your challenges with good advice and guidance, giving you a hand to pull you along in this particular sector. It's very rewarding. I think that's the 3 advice I'll give to anyone.
Well, it is 3 very good pieces of advice there. And it's been really lovely to get to know you a bit better and to talk about this experience. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been great to listen to what your journey has been. So we really appreciate your time talking to us on Humanitarian Conversations. We'll see you at EHP and heat training soon.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to Humanitarian Conversations, a podcast by RedR Australia. You can learn more about our work at redr.org.au, and we invite you to join our conversations on LinkedIn and Facebook. If you enjoyed this episode of Humanitarian Conversations, I encourage you to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with your friends, family, and colleagues. This podcast episode was produced and engineered by Jill Farrer. I'm Sally Cunningham. Thanks for listening.